Welcome to the Ancient Wisdom Modern Science podcast with me, Michelle Hammond. Today, I'm joined by Amanda King and Dr Hari Kuhan as we celebrate the launch of their groundbreaking new book, Metabolic Drugs for Cancer, a bold, brilliant and timely look at how metabolic science is reshaping the future of cancer care. Let's dive in. My absolute great pleasure to welcome back Amanda King to the podcast, and also to introduce Dr. Hari, who has worked with Amanda to produce an incredible book that I'm so excited to tell you more about. But before we get into the book and why they've wrote it and who it's for, I'm just going to get them both to tell us a little bit more about their backgrounds for those of you that don't know. And remember that if you haven't watched the interview we've done with Amanda previously, I will add the links to that underneath the video. So do go on over and rewatch that, because there are some absolute nuggets of insight and guidance in there that I know will be invaluable to your health and well-being. So welcome to the podcast, the two of you. Lovely to see you both.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
So Amanda, start with you. We've spoke before and you've kind of explained your sort of background, and you are doing some incredible work supporting people primarily with cancer, but with chronic health as the metabolic nutritionist. You've got some incredible resources, I know, with your Substack and your socials. So tell us a little bit about your sort of background and what led you here.
Yeah, sure. I guess, I graduated as a nutritional therapist, following on from a background actually working with women in breastfeeding and birth for several years. I ran groups to help women with all aspects of natural parenting. I home educated my kids as well. And I was very, very interested in psychology. So I did some training in counseling, psychotherapy, things like that prior to embarking on study actually with the CNM in nutritional therapy. So I did that first, and then I bolted on a naturopathic diploma to the end of that, and then I did some training in nutrigenomics. So I did quite a lot of work with nutrigenomics, interpreting methylation tests, DNA tests, and that was kind of embedded into my nutrition naturopathic work. Yeah. And then I also studied again further integrative metabolic oncology with Naisha Winters, and that kind of secured the niche which I now find myself in, which is working in integrative oncology with people with cancer mostly.
Yeah, amazing, fantastic, and some great names people will be familiar with there as well to follow up. So Dr. Hari, tell us a little bit about you. I know you kind of originally sort of studied at Imperial College and you're a medical oncologist by sort of training. Tell us a little bit about your incredible backstory.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having us on board. It's hard to follow Amanda with that, but basically, yes. So I trained in medical oncology in London, and I went into research time looking into the metabolic approaches against pancreas cancer stem cells, and went on to, I guess, carve a career out in metabolic oncology, as the label, I guess, is sort of discussed these days. So the ambition to try to optimize the body's environment as best as possible to enhance outcomes for cancer patients. So enhance the efficacy of conventional treatments, or maintain remission, or even, of course, prevention more ideally. I specialize a lot in metabolic medicine using repurposed medicines. So agents that are well known for certain conditions, but maybe haven't been exploited in the conventional sense for their anti-cancer abilities. And I also spend a lot of time in research in sort of early phase clinical trials, phase 1 and 2 trials in cancer medicine. So over the years, I kind of sort of carved out a career trying to exploit all of those aspects of experience to try and now, in a conformative way, sort of provide support and counselling for patients who are seeking to do a little bit more beyond sort of the conventional paradigm. And in doing so, collaborated more recently over the last couple of years with Amanda, specifically, obviously, with the ambition of optimizing anything else we could do integratively speaking from her set of expertise. And obviously, coming together now, we sort of, got to a point, to evolve to a point where we wanted to produce some work where we could try and sort of stipulate those experiences together and provide a format that could again help intrigue, if not consolidate the interest there is around this sort of topics.
Yeah, amazing. And you said obviously you've done a lot of research, and I know you're continually active in sort of research and repurposed drugs. Tell us a little bit, for people listening that aren't familiar with kind of a summary of stage 1 and sort of phase 1 and phase 2 trials, what that kind of looks like?
So with early phase clinical trials, there's often a kind of a journey, if you like, to get a drug that's a first in human concept to the mainstream. And there's a very rigorous process by which typically pharmaceutical companies might sort of invest in doing a small number study in a small section or a small subpopulation of patients with very specific inclusion-exclusion criteria in mind. If there are positive signals in the success of those early stages, they may then develop to a later phase trial with sort of more refined dosing strategies, if you like, with a larger number of patients, and so on and so forth. And that process can often take, unfortunately, some time, eight or so years, which often is, one of the gut-wrenching problems, occurs in terms of innovation in this field. There are patients, of course, who will be treated as per NICE guidance, for example. So maybe the highest caliber of data to sort of refine a treatment strategy for an individual circumstance, but access to innovation is often very, very sluggish. And it's in that context where patients often then ask the question, maybe after a disappointment or two, what else can I do for myself? So trying to marry our side of the fence of ideas and discussions to the conventional paradigm of how clinical trials work is extremely difficult, and often very difficult to break the conservative culture of, acceptance of other things beyond the paradigm of the predefined protocols. So my work, I guess, primarily, or our work, and ultimately, Amanda's, thrown herself into the research behind this, maybe is more informed than me, in terms of the work she had to go through to help put this book together. You'll find smoke signals of relevance from preclinical trials, so lab-based studies, maybe retrospective reviews where clever scientists look back over time to try and weave out signals statistically of relevance with certain agents. But trying to triangulate all that data and move it forward in a way that's consistent with a gold standard framework of clinical trials is where there's a large void. And it's why I guess it's ourselves, and other, important names in the space, as Amanda alluded to, that are trying to drive this conversation forward in some form.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hear a lot about repurposed drugs in the integrative sort of field, Amanda, don't we? And, it's when we look at sort of Patricia Peat and Jay McClelland, and as you say, Dr. Nasher and stuff, that, they've always been kind of big advocates for it. And it's a question that I know sort of on social, people forever showing protocols and looking at who's taking what and what doses and for what circumstances. And it is an absolute minefield, isn't it? So it's incredible that we've got minds like yours sort of delving in to the latest sort of research and science and sort of ensuring it's up to date. So tell us about what drove the decision to write this book.
And credit where credit's due. Jane McClelland was the pioneer of this kind of movement, if you want to call it that. She, through many experiments, actually, in lots of ways and lots of investigative work, found out how to create her own tailored protocol to starve her own cancer. And that's been the inspiration for many, many people in our field. And in addition to that, Dr. Paul Marrick of the Independent Medical Alliance, who wrote the foreword and a review for the book, has written a book on the use of repurposed drugs for cancer. And studying integrative oncology, as I've said, in the way that I did, as a nutritional therapist, obviously the emphasis is on supplements. It's on integrating complementary therapies. There is some talk about using repurposed drugs as well, although, as Harry said, we don't have the gold standard research on these pathways that, in terms of they're not recommended for that as a primary purpose yet. Maybe that will change at some point. But my interest was, when I started reading about these drugs and started understanding much more about the mechanisms, and from a supplement point of view, and also then from a drugs point of view, I was fascinated. So I began researching them, I began writing about them, and it just didn't stop. It snowballed and it became a passion of mine. I've written about it on the Metabolic Nutritionist Substack. Lots of people have subscribed to that at the moment. I'm nearly at 42,000 subscribers and about 34,000 followers. So it's of interest to many, many people. And, you know, then that's the thing. It was of interest to me. It's of interest to them. It makes a lot of sense to write about it. And I needed somebody with lots of knowledge about repurposed drugs to help me put that together. And that's where Hari came in. And both of us together have worked on this and produce something which we hope represents the best of the information that's available right now. And hopefully we've put it together in a way that is easy to read. Unlike, you know, I mean, when you're trawling through medical documents, it can be, you know, it can be a bit of a drag sometimes. Some of them are very interesting. Sometimes they're very, very interesting. And sometimes it can take a while, you know, maybe that's just me, but, you know, you really have to dig into it. And it's very, very interesting. And there's a lot of link making to do. And I hope that we've been able to achieve producing something that's readable and informative, and for those who want it referenced, and that makes sense, and that can be used really as a kind of guide and an information source and education, really.
And is that the kind of key for you with this book? So the book's called Metabolic Drugs for Cancer. And I love kind of the opening sort of line I saw here was exploring cancer's metabolic secrets, which I think people are kind of, you know, sort of delving into much deeper now than ever before, and the drugs powering a new era in cancer treatment. So is the hope of this book not only to be a guide for those living with cancer and having to navigate, you know, their journey of care and maybe, you know, sort of support or infrastructure the standard options of care for them? Is this also in the hope that this is going to change the way standard of care is
it would be great
working within that sector?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Hari. Yeah, please.
Well, I was sorry, thank you, Amanda. I was just going to say, I mean, we hope it's a step in that direction. You know, I think we know the mechanism is very difficult to sort of dent or move into, etc., for various reasons. You know, actually, and I think you know, in truth, as we can all appreciate, patients are seeking other ideas, you know, things that they can incorporate into their journey, their battles, from social media. You know, they're getting a lot from social media. They're doing internet, so they were doing internet searches. It was, forgive me for saying the F word, Facebook, and more recently AI, right? So people are looking for more. They're not getting the more from the conversations with the conventional practitioners. You know, they are very busy in clinic. These doctors are 40 patient clinics. They're struggling. The services are stretched, and they're doing their very best.
Underfunded. Yep.
They're underfunded. They're doing their very best to enact the best thing that they are told that they can do. And as I said, it's based on the highest caliber of data. There's just not enough of it. Yeah. So it's a patient journey battle to inform themselves, to empower themselves, to take the reins of control in some shape or form. And as we said, there are many things, there are many moving parts to this. Okay, with the metabolic approach, of course there are. You know, lifestyle is probably number one, right? That's the first thing. One has the power to maybe shape and control in the confines of their own home and their environment, the well-being, the psychological element, all of this stuff is priority. So an additive element we're just saying is, okay, well, medicines tend to be very thoroughly evaluated. It might be easier or quicker to look up the mechanisms of a drug like metformin, for example, or GLP agonists we're hearing a lot more about these days, and look at the data sets behind them, the trends, the interaction potentials with conventional treatments, you know, all these fears. It's a terrifying space. It's a very overwhelming space, and most people get lost in that rabbit hole of information. It's a blessing and a curse in a way, right? So if we, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, you know, you'll see in the book, it's very well referenced. And it's very up to date. And even this information may change again. You know, there may be in 5-10 years time, we may look back and say, Amanda, what do we do? you know, it's the opposite, you know, but for the minute, for the now, like in the last couple of years, you know, it's that heavily referenced. And so we wanted this to be a first step, a chapter that, you know, practitioners, if they really wanted to, if they're inquisitive enough to want to look into something, that was heavily referenced. But for patients who wanted to, you know, heighten that level of learning and awareness, you know, it's written in such a way that, you know, most people can understand. You know, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, fine, but that's the same with anything in information. The information era, you know, we do have to get better at processing information. You can see the mistakes on Facebook. Someone plops an article of a preclinical study and everyone goes crazy, but there's a lack of ability to interpret it. So So there are many messages we're trying to hit home, including, of course, this is not a roadmap for you to follow on your own. This is something where you engage, you interest, you quell your interest, but then seek help, seek oversight, seek someone to talk to about this. If it isn't your oncology doctor, it might be Amanda, it might be myself, it might be someone else, whoever it is, but someone with the right expertise to help have these discussions. And it's only through discussion. And someone asked me this a long time ago in a podcast, what can I do to help? Well, it's discussion. Have a talk with your oncologist. Like, mention this thing to them. They may absorb. They may be happy to engage with you. They may not. But it's only through those conversations where I then eventually hear the consultant will say, actually keep doing what you're doing. Whatever it is you're doing, it's working. You broke through the expected prognosis, or how long I thought you were going to respond to this drug for. I'm really interested in this. What are you doing again? So it's just to try and embolden and empower patients to have that source material to further this hopeful, this drive.
Yeah, amazing. And why these drugs? I mean, I know, some of them that we hear a lot, the metformins, the statins, etc. What is it about these particular repurposed drugs that has kind of had you want to write about them?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I can answer that. And also, just going back to the last thing, if you don't mind, that Harry just said, he mentioned about when people are using, working with their own practitioner, using their own sort of combination of the drugs, the off-label drugs and the supplements and the lifestyle changes and the whole package of things that work for them. And then their oncologist says, whatever you're doing is, keep doing it, it's working. A case in point is Dale Atkinson, who actually you have interviewed and who both Harry and I worked with from pretty much the beginning of when he saw complementary health. And so that is a case in point. I think that that's available on your channel as well. So in answer to your question, which was what was it? Sorry.
These drugs. Why these drugs?
Why these drugs? Okay, so what we've tried to do is we've tried to pick the most popular, the most well-known, the ones with the most research behind them. And coming from a metabolic approach to cancer, which is how these drugs affect metabolism, cancer metabolism. So we might be looking at for example, how a cancer cell might duplicate itself, and how do we interrupt that process? How does it take, what about proteins? How can we stop it from reaping proteins in the body so it can use carbon to make more of itself? So what we've done is we've tried to look at all of the different pathways within each individual most popular drug, because there are over 3,000, I think, counting drugs. We can't write about them all, and some of them are just not going to be that well researched, not that relevant, and maybe there's another drug that does it better than that one. So that's what we've tried to do, is to look at as many accessible drugs and look at explain what the major pathways are within the body that each of them follows to inhibit the cancering process.
Yeah, lovely. And I think I saw that on your Health, Dr. Harry's website, about kind of, it kind of starts with understanding, doesn't it? And I think that, that's where this is so great, isn't it? Is giving people access to names of drugs they're hearing, but they're not quite sure, and they know they've helped somebody, but they don't know how they work and how they get hold of them, and to have a resource that people can go to and go, actually, now you can deep dive into, that particular drug and what it's being used for, and the pathway it might be helping. And then with personalized help and specialist support, look at how that might support you. And how is it people do get hold of these repurposed drugs?
So typically, and you touched on a brilliant point there, is that personalization, aspect of things. So I set up Lucio Health with a colleague of mine, Raf. We essentially wanted to, I guess, as you said, there's an academic level to this where you can say, okay, let's look at the specifics of a cancer type, the pathology, the cells, etc. Academically, look back in time to see what has been published about those pathways and mechanisms, and find a matching, with, the integrative aspect of things, naturopathic agents, of course, repurposed medicines, integrative therapies, etc. There's another level of maybe seeking that information via sensitivity testing these days. So in vitro testing in test tubes, so extrapolating cancer cells, testing various agents against those cells in a petri dish setting, next generation sequencing, seeking more information about the mutational drivers of the cancer, maybe even more about the behavior of the cancer, angiogenesis, some other terms, some other sort of hallmarks of the cancer, and then using that layer or extra layer of personal information to again titrate to the individual drugs themselves. I guess there another further layer is then to again how to figure out from the theory, because there's one thing about the bookwork, but it's about how you apply things in the real world.
Yeah.
How do you create a logistically plausible plan for the individual
Yeah.
without getting lost in that rabbit hole of having an Excel file of 50 different things where you can't, surely, predict any and all potential interactions, let alone the burden on the liver or the kidneys, etc. And then, of course, the conventional treatment or the medicines the patient's already taking, we can't ever do anything that might detract from that ability to maintain that schedule of that well-defined timetable of treatment. So this is where the extra oversight is needed. This is where, again, that the awareness academically and experience is needed. Maybe the layer of the sensitivity testing. There is even more of a use of the AI aspect of things. There are companies now, clinics now that use AI to help pair these findings with maybe academically based publications. So there's a lot going on, and there are many moving parts to it. But the key thing is to personalize to the individual circumstance and situation, and then oversee, because once you employ a plan, as you know, everybody responds differently to oral agents, chemicals of all kinds. So again, there's got to be process, staggered introductions, oversight, monitoring of blood tests, good angles, open channels of communication. I do my very best to ensure a patient is supplied with any paperwork information to then share with their oncology doctor or their chemo pharmacist. We want this to be a collaborative effort, right? As opposed to the dark side and the private sector secretly working under the radar to thwart the efforts of the conventional heroes, if you like. So
Yeah.
got to be, that has to be the only way we sort of do this, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing, and it's so important, isn't it? And I know, Amanda, we've spoke about this before, haven't we? That kind of just the personalization, the opportunities to leverage some of the resources and amazing tech and sort of testing that's available. But that it's not just front loaded, as you've just said there, Dr. Hari. The ongoing sort of monitoring, tuning, and developing. That's sort of absolutely sort of critical, and that's kind of the risk, isn't it? When there's information's just out there, but it's putting it into the hands of someone who can apply it and can kind of support the individual with it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that is why, for example, in my practice, every single follow-up, at every consultation, I ask my patients to bring in at the very least some blood work so we can track markers. Hari did mention about the liver function, and obviously kidneys are important, but there are also other things from a naturopathic point of view, like measuring blood glucose, seeing what kind of impacts some of these drugs and some of the supplements that I would prescribe would be having on things like blood sugar, insulin, and also vitamins. I mean, there's a whole world of information in those sorts of diagnostics that we can apply to adjust protocols as they evolve.
Yeah, amazing. But that's an exciting time for medicine now, isn't it? It's why the integrative approach is so beautiful, because we have an opportunity with tests and data that's available that we can abstract and we can monitor. This doesn't have to be guesswork anymore, does it? We're able to kind of get really detailed and accurate pictures of the individual, and then sort of blend a protocol and sort of support program uniquely to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And I know Lucia Health, Hari, that's a key part of what you do, isn't it? I was looking at your kind of website there, and I know kind of treating everyone and making sure that their journey is very tailored is
You're right. I mean, that's
your USP.
You're absolutely right, and I think I was saying before, the only way to do this is in that way, and it is a lot of work. But for example, I always say to patients, maybe the easy bit is constructing your plan, the hard bit is enacting it. And so I have to make myself available for patients to contact me in between any formal reviews, and I might see one, formally once every 3 months, but I'll be back and forthing with them throughout. If there's a question about side effects or a blood work issue goes off or whatever it might be, or there's been some bad news and we need to rejig our approach or discuss, a change in direction in any way. So that supportive element is, again, what I knew was an important integral part of the service that I wanted to build for sure. And I think, again, when there is so much that can go wrong, you need to be dynamic and you need to be accessible. And so it all ties in together. I mean, this is the unfortunate thing. I'm sure any doctor, any specialist would want to do this, but it's very hard in the public sector. In the way it's sort of put together, it's very hard to be there, available and accessible to that large number of patients that you're in charge of. At any sort of individual hospital or team. In a team, you've got clinical nurse specialists doing their very best, being overrun. To the brink of collapse. Doctors themselves probably brink of collapse. But the patient in the middle who needs that extra support and needs that extra help. This is why I truly believe that education is so important, and informing someone as best you can. It's often very surprising. Again, I get to draw from my experience to then be able to fill in the gaps. The patient doesn't really understand what immunotherapy is. They don't understand the side effects that they have to look out for, or this. They don't understand what questions that they should be thinking to ask their doctor. There are so many just missed elements or levels of knowledge, that I think obviously work against the whole process. But as I said, I'm lucky. I can do that. I have the time to maybe dedicate, having my own clinic and being able to kind of work in my own hours in a way. Much to the distress of my wife, but yeah, it works both ways. But I understand that. But you need to give that support, but certainly at the very beginning, when it's a terrifying process. When you have a diagnosis, you have no idea what to do. Your mind's all over the place, and only when the dust settles, some have the strength to maybe engage with people such as ourselves. But that training, that support, that comfort blanket, that safety net provided for the initial couple of months, then one is empowered enough to kind of manage things to a better degree on their own. So all of that. So
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? That first few months, the overwhelming sort of anxiety and fear and the psychological hijack that happens with such a diagnosis often takes hold, and people don't know what they don't know, so they don't know what to ask. They don't know how to advocate for themselves or how to sort of question. But then as time goes on, it's giving them hope and giving them back power to kind of see the role they can play and all the ways they can help themselves, and that they can influence their health and well-being, and that isn't just something that's done outside of them. Is such a really key message, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's worth mentioning, it's also the relationship with your practitioner is so important. I mean, that is basically what we were just talking about, in terms of, we seeing people at the point when they're ready to make that connection, and then helping them to advocate for themselves, and then basically being there and being somebody you develop a relationship with. I just think that that's such an integral part of healing, of going through a process like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of whole family medicine kind of principles, kind of we all sort of grew up and were shaped by. That unfortunately just the system doesn't, and the funding and all the resources and the depth of kind of where we can pull that apart, we can see just doesn't kind of, it's not a win-win, is it, as a general rule? So what's your hope for the book? We've said obviously it's going to be a great resource, going to enable people to delve in and kind of get the latest kind of clinical research and insights around the individual sort of drugs and how they may support and the pathways that they may sort of help. What's your hope of where this goes from here?
Amanda?
Okay, sure. So it's interesting. If you had asked me that recently, it would have been just to finish it. I've got no idea. I don't know what happens after that. I just want to finish the book. So now really it's just interesting. What I would absolutely love, and my intention and wish, is that it does help to empower people, and that it is interesting, and that it does spark a passion for delving a bit deeper into the mechanisms of what's going on, finding out more, and believing, understanding that some of this information that might have seemed a little bit inaccessible before is now a little bit more accessible, and maybe you'll know what questions to ask of your oncology team, or of your practitioner, or even of your pharmacist, understanding what's going on in your body, and how to complement that as well with things like the ketogenic diet, or why a low carb diet is so very, very important, and how some of these drugs might help to make your chemotherapy and radiation work much better and protect your healthy cells. You know, it's giving people so much more empowerment. I would love for that to be the case with this book.
Yeah, amazing. That sounds, I mean, what a gift to give to the world if that happens as a result. And we were just saying, sort of before we started to record, I saw the bestseller kind of title next to the book already, which is a huge, you know, sort of achievement for you both, considering that the book has literally just dropped. So I have absolutely no doubt that it is going to be, you know, a must read for anyone who either works within the integrative health and medical oncology space, and for obviously, you know, the kind of relentless and growing number of people that are being impacted by, you know, cancer and, you know, scaling kind of chronic health disease.
I think that's a really important point. Sorry, I think that's a really important point. There was an article about 2 years ago in Medical News Today. I think that was the first time I saw this piece of data, which is just simply that 1 in 2 people were predicted to get cancer by the year 2030 in their lifetimes. And that means 50% of everybody listening to this podcast is going to be affected by cancer at some point in their lives. So the more research, this is one piece of a very big puzzle. The more research, the more information that we can get access to, that we could maybe put out there or give or direct people to, the better, because it's going to affect everybody in some way.
Well, go on, Harry.
Sorry, forgive me. I was just going to say, to add to that, you know, I think, I think it's a point you literally just made. I mean, ultimately, it all ties into together. Like it all feeds into each other. Like I would say to patients, look, you have a treatment, and obviously it's based on great data, but it's anyone's guess how you'll respond. You know, you don't know. Are you gonna? Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 20 years? You don't know, right? But the mission, bearing in mind there are often finite numbers of treatment lines in treatment for different cancers. There aren't, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. There's A, B, if we're lucky, C, if we're lucky, D, maybe, right? So the mission is to get the most out of any individual line of treatment, so you are around for the breakthrough, for that new drug, that new clinical trial thing, that new whatever it might be, you know, in the future, CAR T, TIL therapy. So anything that we can do to optimize our chances of getting the best possible outcomes, we should be talking about, and we should be thinking about, right? As opposed to whack-a-mole, so it's being reactive all the time to sort of, you know, breakthroughs of cancer, etc. How do we prevent? How do we slow? How do we turn our bodies into a machine? You know, I often also say my patients end up being, and you might say the same, Amanda, that the best possible versions of themselves. That they become extremely fit. They're, you know, intermittent fasting. They're going for walks. They're running. They're cycling. They're watching what they eat. You know, and this is obviously helpful in many other ways, right? Metabolic syndrome, over-encompassing term for heart problems, brain problems, inflammation problems, hormone problems. If you want to live forever like a VIP, biohacking, longevity, the whole shebang, it all comes under one roof, right? So all of this stuff is really good for everything and anything, and we should be investing more time and effort into this in the public sector. Of course, we don't. So to that earlier question of where I'd hope the book to be an important, emboldening chapter in that sort of drive. But beyond that as well, just to drop it in, we'd also, having been inspired by the process, love to create more work and more bodies of work looking into more specifically, maybe, you know, individual cancers. Again, our kind of the collaborative inputs in terms of what we think in the here and now would be the most relevant, you know, agent systems, pathways, integrative therapies to consider at whatever points in the journey to help with surgery, perioperative protocols to reduce inflammation and modulate the immune system, biopsies, how do you prevent, you know, or mitigate risks with biopsy, you know, etc. Radiation treatment, what should be considered when, you know, and we've both learned a lot from each other, I think, in this process. There's a lot that I don't know. I never profess to know too much, but there's a lot that I have learned from Amanda, and I hope it's been, you know, the other way too. But that's a beautiful thing, you know, it's a beautiful thing because we all have our circles of interest, our own drums to bang in a way. If you look at the specialisms in, so let's, for example, the non-oncology space, everyone's got their own thing. It's just about trying to merge it a bit together and find something that is, again, as I said before, logistically plausible and safe. And I think that's what we're trying to push forward.
Yeah. Which is beautiful collaboration, isn't it? And kind of where we should all sit, because science is this kind of evolving beast, isn't it? It's not this static thing. And so actually curiosity should lead us all, and we should be open to kind of being wrong, not knowing everything, and sort of, you know, constantly evolving that sort of exploration. Because actually, as you said, you know, what we know now is our truth, isn't it? But what we learn in 5 years' time and 50 years' time, and we can see that with historic medicine, as I've just been doing medieval medicine with my son for GCSE, and kind of been reminded of the horrors of things we used to believe and practice back in the day, which was, you know, not that long ago.
Of course.
Yeah, amazing. Well, listen, both of you, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to kind of dock in and sort of learn more about the book, Metabolic Drugs for Cancer. Do make sure you get a copy. It's available on Amazon. We'll put all the links sort of below so you can grab your copy now. It's available, I believe, in both softcover and hardcover, or on your Kindle, or anywhere else you get your sort of reading sort of materials. Do check it out and do leave feedback. I know both of you are really keen to kind of get people's feedback, get people engaging, get people involved in the conversation. Because that in itself kind of just keeps the momentum, doesn't it, going of kind of how we can facilitate more research, more understanding, and keep asking those questions. So thank you both for all of your work in this. I know it's not an easy undertaking, a book anyway, but especially something as kind of more technical, technically sort of focused, and sort of where the accuracy needs to be the best it can be, and to bring the research up to date, because it's just brilliant to have information that is right up to date now for all of these drugs that everyone can get easy access to. So brilliant job, well done.
Thank you. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course you can.
If that's all right. Harry and I have been speaking with Yes to Life charity, and we have an initiative that we would like to share with your listeners, which is that for leading up to Christmas, for every book that we sell, we're going to donate £1 to the Yes to Life charity. So we're aiming for 1,000 books sold. We would like just to point out that if you know anybody who might like the book, if you would like it yourself, if you would like to buy it for your co-workers, we'll be donating extra money to the Yes to Life charity. So yeah, so basically that's it. We just really want to let everybody know that that's happening.
Well, that's amazing. And you know that Yes to Life is my favourite charity. Robin has kind of the most integrity in this sector that I think I've ever come across. And so, yeah, absolute massive motivation to why you should all buy more of the book, because anything we can do to support Yes to Life and their mission is absolutely priority. So yeah, amazing, great opportunity for everyone to get that in their pre-Christmas reading lists. Fantastic. Lovely to see you both. Thank you so much for all that you do, and I can't wait to see more and more sort of views come in and those sales skyrocket.
Thank you for joining me on the Ancient Wisdom Modern Science podcast. My thanks to Amanda King and Dr Hari Kuhan for sharing their perspective and passion. If you want to read more, their new book is out now and all the links will be down below. I'm Michelle Hammond. Until next time, stay curious and be well.